course, it's time again for another episode of Jason's Game Room, the only podcast on YouTube that is all gaming all the time. What more could you ask for? If it's board games, CCGs, video games, dice games, hell, if it's pen and paper games, it's on this channel. So you got to keep tuning in for new episodes to see what I'm going on about. On today's show, I want to talk to you about gaming conventions. More specifically, what you should expect at gaming conventions if you've never been to one, what they're about, what you can do there. I'm going to tell you about a couple big gaming conventions and go into detail about them. Now, it's been a while since I've been to an actual gaming convention. I went to a couple years ago, a couple smaller conventions. Nowadays, I pretty much only attend Comic Cons, time permitting, because my comic collection is something that I've been working on for so many years now that it's one of the few conventions I'm willing to go to and pay the money. But anyways, getting back on topic here, the gaming conventions I have been to, they're much like your standard Comic-Con. You have your vendors and displays. You can still dress up as characters or something from games that you play and experience the cosplay and all that kind of fun. It is... And this is drawing on experience from Comic-Cons, as well as going to gaming conventions that I mentioned. You're going to spend a bit of money if you're a serious gamer, depending on what you're there for or looking for. If it's a video game convention, you're going to see a lot of vendors with older games and retro stuff. So if you're into that, if you're into retro gaming, you're going to drop a lot of money because you're going to see stuff you wouldn't normally see in stores. And that being said, that retro video game stores are very few and far between now. There was a time when you can go into any town and there'd be one or two retro or used video game stores and you could browse to your heart delight and get a good price. But now it's big business. As time keeps progressing, those retro games are worth more and more and they become more rare. So when you go to a gaming convention that's video games and deals with a lot of retro games, you're going to see a lot of higher prices than you normally would. So be prepared for that. As someone who likes to get the odd retro game, as much as it pains me to say this, it's cheaper for me to go on eBay and pay a few bucks shipping and get it off there. We do have a retro video gaming store here in town, and I've been to it once or twice, actually a few times, and I've gotten a decent price there, but it's extremely hard now to go into a physical location and get a good price and actually find that retro game you're looking for. A lot of the vendors there have the same agenda, the ones at the conventions. You're really not going to be able to barter with them unless you have something to barter with, and even then it's tough because they're dead set on getting what they think is a good price. You're going to see at these conventions as well a lot of new things. You're going to see advertisements. You might see major companies at the bigger conventions from the game console companies and the game manufacturers promoting their new shit. The smaller ones I've been to were mainly about used and retro video games. You didn't see a lot of, if any, manufacturers there. I believe there was a representative from a video game company itself, but no one from a console maker like Nintendo or Sega or anything like that. That leads me into telling you about E3. It is the biggest video game convention on the continent. It's usually held out east. Sorry, I believe it's held out west. But aside from that, Los Angeles to be more specifically. I forget things sometimes. Believe it or not, my memory's fading. But the bigger game conventions, and it's been maybe a small regret that I've never either been to the tech show in Las Vegas or E3 in Los Angeles firsthand to see this, but I have seen video clips and news reports. And it looks like a lot of fun, and you'll see a lot of manufacturers of the consoles and video game companies themselves setting up pavilions and stations where you can try the hardware and the software and play demos to your heart's content. Much like if you go to the big Fan Expo in Toronto, which is like a mega convention, it's a hell of an experience. You can't just not go to it. Unfortunately, in my case, I don't have the money to go gallivanting across the continent and book hotels and buy tickets for that, but it is something you want to check it out. at some point, if you can get to at least one big convention, no matter what it is. On the other flip of the coin, in terms of gaming conventions, you have the conventions that are based on tabletop games, so board games, dice, CCGs. I've never been to a specific table game convention. I came close to going to one in Toronto, but I had to cancel my plans for that because something else popped up at the time. But it's something that I've wanted to do, and I've only been to some small local conventions, which are in my town. There's not much to them. There's a few vendors, some artists. You can talk to a few people, but they're mainly there to sell stuff. They don't really care about reminiscing or speaking too much about it. And one of my big regrets in terms of gaming is not attending Gen Con. Now, if you're not familiar with Gen Con, it's the biggest tabletop gaming convention in the world, and it's held annually in Indianapolis. It has been, I think, since 2003 or 2004, when it used to be held in Wisconsin. Everything tabletop gaming is there, especially back when CCGs were in their heyday. You saw new releases and new expansions premiered at Gen Con. And it was where everybody wanted to be. And when I was coming out of high school in 1999, and I had a bunch of friends that were big on CCGs and board games, one of our things that we tried to do is that, and even though we were in high school, just on the way out, we didn't have much money. We were trying to figure out a way to pool resources and go to Gen Con. Unfortunately, it never happened because between us, man, we were poor. So we ended up just checking out what the local collectible stores had in terms of the CCGs and the literature on them, as well as any kind of release information. But it was nice to read about them in the magazines at the time. Every kind of game is represented at Gen Con. They don't just do CCGs, but you have board games, miniatures, Warhammer, card games, dice, Dungeons and Dragons, any kind of pen and paper type tabletop game is represented at that show. And you're thinking that I'm just going to go on about it because of how great it is, but Gen Con has one major drawback. Unlike other conventions in which you could either get your tickets ahead of time or show up at the door and purchase a ticket for a lot more money, but you can still go in the day of the show. Gen Con has a system they've had for many years, which I find extremely perplexing and annoying, is the badge system. So months and months in advance, you have to pre-order your badge, which lets you get in. You can't just walk up and go into Gen Con, and I think that's wrong, because part of the freedom and fun of going to a convention sometimes is a spur of the moment, is not just so much as planning it months in advance, but saying, you know what, there's a big convention going on in town. I'm going to walk in later in the day and go into it. They don't allow you to do that, and I've always wondered why. I have emailed them in the past. I've never gotten an answer from the organizers of Gen Con, surprisingly enough. I've emailed other conventions and the people that run them asking questions, and they've happily answered, but Gen Con never seems to answer questions. I don't know why. I do not like the badge system. I think you should allow people to walk in and buy a ticket at the door. Take, for example, Fan Expo in Toronto, the convention I mentioned before, which is a huge, multifaceted convention. You can buy tickets in advance and passes and deluxe passes if you want, or you can walk in, pay a few bucks more at the door, get your lanyard around your neck and go in, which I did a couple times going to that expo because I lived closer and I didn't need to book everything in advance. It's annoying to see that Gen Con just keeps with this tradition of badges, even though there's a lot of people, especially in the online forum community, that decry it because not everybody wants to book ahead so far in advance. And you have to understand is the convention's usually held in the summer in Indianapolis, and they start pre-booking in December of the previous year for badges. And you can imagine how fast those badges go. They're usually gone within a week. So you're telling me you can't just walk up, pay a bit more money, and go in? Hello, organizers, you're in business to make money. And then usually over the 3 or 4 days of the convention, they say, oh, we have 63,000 people pass through the doors. In a convention center as big as the one in Indianapolis, that could be so many more people and so many more dollars coming in if you open it up, but they won't do that, and I don't understand why. So that's a major detractor in why even though a bunch of years ago I could have easily afforded at that point rather, to go to Indianapolis, and I found out they were still using the badge system, I did not go. And it sucked because I was going to pick out a hotel and spend the 8 hours and drive down there, but they don't want to do that. So, anyways, aside from those two big conventions and their pros and cons, the highs, the lows, and the downright dirty. I haven't done that for a couple episodes, but when it comes to conventions, there are. When you talk about the highs, there's so much to see and so much to do. There's a lot of times special guests related to the event or the subject matter of the conventions. You can meet some interesting people. You can make new friends there. You can talk with vendors and other consumers and other hobbyists alike, and it's a great place to meet new people and expand your network. The lows, they are busy, they are packed. Sometimes you bump into people. You might have your heart set on buying something at a convention, and then someone buys it and it was the only one there just as you walk up to the table. And as well as you get some nasty vendors who are only there to make a buck. They don't want to talk. They don't give a damn. If you're not talking in the language they're speaking, they kind of ignore you. They're not all like that. I'd say 70% of the vendors at conventions are really nice people. You get that 30% that are assholes. It is what it is. It's a convention. These things happen. The downright dirty, the only thing I can think of that's really downright dirty about conventions is you're going to pay an arm and a leg for a ticket. And I'm speaking as someone who's been going to conventions since he was a teenager, and remembering that I used to go to Comic-Cons and get in for $5, and I'd spend 30 or 40 more on comics or other things because it was so cheap to get in. But now, especially going back a third time to Fan Expo in this show, you're paying 40 or 50 bucks just to get in the door, and that doesn't get you the deluxe pass into the autograph signing. You have to pay more to get into the autographs, and then you're still paying on top of that to get the autographs. I think it's deplorable what they're charging nowadays for Comic-Cons and big conventions. I haven't gone to any of the major ones in Toronto recently because of that. I've been just going to the local ones here because we have one that's free and one that's actually you pay by giving donations to a food bank, which is, I think, amazing, which is better than charging an arm and a leg. But that's pretty much it for the downright dirty. I think the organizers really need to start looking at that and going, hey, we're charging too much. And unfortunately, there's too many people, young people, unfortunately, I got to take shots at them, that are willing to pay it instead of take a step back and think, hey, this is a bit much just to get in the door. But it is what it is. That's all for today's show. Thanks, everybody, again for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends. I mean, I'm Jason, and I'm awesome, and you love listening to me. So spread the word. And, of course, game on!